into mainland China. The East India Company hired a Scottish botanist named Robert Fortune, who shaved his head, wore traditional robes, and disguised himself as a Chinese merchant to infiltrate forbidden inland tea regions. In 1657, you wouldn't drink tea for pleasure. You drank it because you thought you were dying. The first tea was appeared in London when a merchant named Thomas Garraway began selling it as a bizarre, exotic medicinal cure-all. He aggressively marketed these rare leaves to wealthy citizens as a miracle panacea, capable of clearing kidney stones, curing agonizing headaches, and instantly fixing general fatigue. When a single royal wedding changed the beverage history of the world forever. In 1662, King Charles II married a Portuguese princess named Catherine of Braganza, who packed a massive crate of loose-leaf Chinese tea in her personal wedding luggage. Her obsessive daily drinking habit at court instantly turned the rare beverage into the ultimate trend, making it a mandatory hallmark of royal sophistication and elite luxury in Britain. But in 1669, the world's most ruthless corporate empire decided to seize total control of the tea trade. The British East India Company officially imported its first direct shipment of tea into London, and Parliament immediately handed them an absolute legal monopoly over all trade with the Far East. From this moment on, a single corporate entity possessed the terrifying power to dictate the flow, availability, and price of tea across the entire British Empire. It makes tea was so ridiculously expensive that households locked it up like literal gold, because China held a brutal global monopoly on production, which meant Britain was forced to pay for every single ounce of tea using pure silver bullion. To protect this massive financial investment, wealthy families kept their dried tea leaves inside secure, ornate wooden boxes called tea caddies, with the lady of the house keeping the key chained to her waist so the servants couldn't steal a single leaf. In 1717, a clever merchant found a loophole to tap into the most lucrative, untapped market in London: women. Thomas Twining opened the Golden Lion on London's Strand, creating the city's very first dry tea boutique that explicitly welcomed female customers. Before this, public coffee houses were strictly male-only zones filled with tobacco smoke and politics, making Twining's shop the first public social hub for wealthy women. However, the simple act of holding a cup became a brutal psychological weapon for high society gatekeeping. Because tea was still far too expensive for ordinary citizens, elite women turned the domestic tea ritual into a high-stakes arena of social power. Hosting a tea party became a test of hyper-refined manners. The precise way you poured, held a handleless porcelain cup, and gossiped determined whether you were accepted into elite society or cast out forever. In 1834, the British Empire suffered a massive economic panic when they lost their corporate stranglehold on the East. The government officially revoked the East India Company's commercial monopoly on trade with China, threatening to dry up the company's massive revenue streams. Desperate to find a way to secure cheap tea without playing by China's strict trade rules, British executives formed a secret tea committee to see if they could forcibly grow the plant on an industrial scale in colonized India. But few years later, the British military launched a global war over a massive shipment of destroyed narcotics. To pay for their massive tea addiction without draining their silver reserves, the British East India Company had been illegally smuggling millions of pounds of Indian-grown opium into China, creating a devastating addiction crisis. When the Chinese government finally retaliated by seizing and destroying 20,000 chests of British opium, Britain responded by sending warships, igniting the First Opium War. Right as the Opium War was raging across the ocean, Anna Maria Russell, the Duchess of Bedford, complained of a persistent sinking feeling during the long gap between breakfast and an 8 p.m. dinner. She began ordering a private tray of tea, bread and butter to her room at 4 p.m., accidentally launching a massive social trend among her ultra-wealthy friends. And in 1842, Britain won the war and forced China to sign one of the most unfair, brutal treaties in human history. After devastating the Chinese coast with superior naval firepower, Britain forced the Qing dynasty to sign the Treaty of Nanking. This contract forced China to hand over the island of Hong Kong, pay millions in silver reparations, and open up 5 major ports to British merchants, guaranteeing an endless, cheap flood of tea into London. Unexpected things happened when the British Empire pulled off the greatest heist in agricultural history by sending a spy deep into mainland China. The East India Company hired a Scottish botanist named Robert Fortune, who shaved his head, wore traditional robes, and disguised himself as a Chinese merchant to infiltrate forbidden inland tea regions. Fortune successfully stole the closely guarded secrets of tea production and smuggled out over 20,000 viable tea plants, transferring them to British plantations in Assam, India, to permanently break China's monopoly. In 1851, the Industrial Revolution found its ultimate source of cheap, liquid energy, as massive tea plantations in British colonized India began producing at maximum scale, which is the price of tea plummeted so low that it flooded the working-class slums. Factory owners quickly realized that giving their exhausted, underfed laborers hot black tea laced with massive amounts of sugar kept them warm, alert, and working through brutal 14-hour shifts. The working class officially invented their own version of the tea ritual, and it had absolutely nothing to do with being fancy. While the rich enjoyed afternoon tea with dainty sandwiches on low parlor sofas, exhausted laborers came home from the factories to drink incredibly strong, dark tea alongside a heavy, hot evening meal. Because this survival meal was eaten at a standard high wooden dining table, it became proudly known as high tea. In 1880, the British Empire executed a massive, historic public relations rebrand to cover up the dark origins of their favorite drink.
Henshin.
After spending 2 centuries fighting wars, smuggling drugs, and committing corporate espionage to secure the leaf, the British completely erased tea's Chinese history from the public consciousness. They aggressively rebranded tea as the ultimate wholesome symbol of British identity, civility, and moral superiority,